What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Shifty's 49ers Talk. In today's video, we're going to cover the first couple of padded practices for the 49ers this training camp 2025. There is a lot to talk about in this video, so let's not waste any more time. But first, let's run the intro. The 49ers training camp is in full swing, and finally we've been able to see some padded practices that was starting on Monday, and there's been some absolutely highlight plays so far by the 49ers. Before we get into some of the players, what we've been seeing, what they've been doing on the field, let's talk about some of the injuries that have occurred to the Niners. So Jauan Jennings, who kind of is our wide receiver number one, while Brandon Aiyuk is recovering, he did pick up a calf injury. He'll be out for a little while. Renardo Green, he had a hamstring injury, so he's going to miss some time. Those are two of the bigger name guys. We did also have Mykel Williams, the first round pick, the rookie, who is going to miss a couple of days with a minor foot injury, I believe. Ricky Pearsall, he is being eased back into the lineup. But beyond that, outside of the guys that we already know who are missing time, like Malik Mustafa and Brandon Aiyuk, seems like the guys are going really, really well so far. Let's just jump into it right now. And I think we'll start off with the quarterback position. So Brock Purdy clearly is showing that he has command of this offense. He has command of the huddle, and he's really just showing that presence that he has. You're seeing a bunch of really good throws from Brock Purdy, specifically one that happened yesterday to Jordan Watkins. It was just like a 50-yard bomb, hit him perfectly in stride, which would have gone for a big score. Purdy has also thrown some interceptions in training camp, and I do agree with a lot of the analysts who say that, you really don't want to look at stats necessarily for training camp, because you just never know what offenses are trying to implement new plays. Maybe they're just trying to see how, certain plays would work possibly in a game situation, going up against a very good defense as well. But when you think about it, this is the time where you can experiment and practice some things. And it's also a chance for guys to, work on some, whether it's wide receivers, whether it's blocking schemes from the offensive line. So things are never going to be perfect. Overall, though, I think Brock has shown a good command of the offense, going into just another year, another offseason. And this offseason has been relatively stress-free. Once he signed the contract, even before then, he was working out with a number of guys. So it's a really good sign, I think, for Brock Purdy. We'll quickly move on to Mac Jones, who looks pretty solid out there. Mac Jones also throws a really nice deep ball, which is good to see. Look, he's making mistakes. He's new to this offense. It's going to take him some time to really kind of get it together. But I do think Mac Jones has a really solid opportunity, especially during preseason and a lot of these practices too, to kind of solidify himself as a very solid backup. And should there be injuries that occur to other teams at the quarterback position, potentially they could come calling to San Francisco, especially if Mac Jones can put on some good performances in preseason games and as we progress through training camp. So if we move on to the wide receivers, Jordan Watkins is a guy that we mentioned. He had a really nice play, connecting with Brock Purdy on that deep pass. And that's something that you're going to want to see from San Francisco. Last season, we did not have the ability to stretch the field at all on offense. So having a guy with that 4.3 speed could be key to unlocking another aspect of this offense. Russell Gage, I think, is the veteran guy who I think will be a surprise, but he will make the 53-man roster. That's just my opinion. He's someone who's been around the league. He's had multiple 700-yard receiving seasons, and although he hasn't played in a couple years due to injuries, he is finally healthy, ready to go. I think he's someone who can make a positive impact for the 49ers, especially when you consider Aiyuk's going to miss the start of the season, Demarcus Robinson likely to miss the first 3 games, and you never know what else can happen. And you need depth because it's just Jauan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, Jacob Cowing is also missing time, so this is a good opportunity for Russell Gage to make his presence felt. Speaking of Ricky Pearsall, he's kind of being eased back into practice, so practice for a day, get another day off. Hopefully, as we get closer to preseason games and eventually the regular season, he will be able to practice a lot more consistently because he does need to build that chemistry, build that rapport with Brock Purdy. But overall, you gotta like what you see from Ricky Pearsall. He finished 2024 on a high note, so if we can kind of continue that progression, I think that's gonna bode well for Ricky Pearsall. We'll move on to the offensive line and some interesting things that we're seeing there. So Spencer Burford, who just reworked his contract, going to get more guaranteed money, but it's actually a lower cap hit, which is good. He's been working at left tackle. At left guard, you have Nick Zakelj, Jake Brendel at center, you have Dominic Pooney at right guard, and then Colton McKivitz at right tackle. Of course, Trent Williams is your starter at left tackle, but being the veteran that he is, he's actually taking a number of days off, like veteran days, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing because it gives a guy like Spencer Burford more reps at left tackle, and that gives him an opportunity also in preseason. Can he impress? Because he's probably looking at what happened with Jalen Moore, and Jalen Moore got $15 million from the Kansas City Chiefs, so if Burford can do something similar, that bodes well for him in the future. But overall, something that I'm really looking forward to is offensive guard Ben Bartch coming back from injury very, very soon. And that's going to be a big thing, I believe, at the left guard position. Nick Zakelj is working in there now, but I believe it's going to be Ben Bartch's job to lose once he comes back from his injury. And you think about it, Trent Williams, Ben Bartch, Jake Brendel, Dominic Pooney, Colton McKivitz, that's a pretty solid offensive line. Not the best in the NFL by any means. Maybe I think a little bit higher than, middle of the pack. But I do think if they can kind of put it all together, especially and the guys can stay healthy, that's going to be really big for the 49ers offense. But there you have it, guys, for the offensive side of the ball. That's how things have been looking. Overall, things at the running back position, just to sum it up quickly, have kind of been progressing as we would expect. McCaffrey looks amazing. He is someone who's also kind of getting those veteran days off, but he's just looking lightning quick, so it's great to have him back. Jordan James, the rookie, has been impressing. Garendo's doing his thing. We talk about tight end as well. Kittle, we just know what Kittle does. What I'd like to see is Luke Farrell. We know that he can block. Can he maybe become a minor factor in the tight end in the receiving game for the tight end position? And then who wins that tight end 3 job? You have a number of guys going for it, so that is definitely a battle to look at when it comes to the preseason games. But coming up next, guys, we're going to talk about the defense. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball, and there is a lot of good stuff to talk about here. Let's start off with the defensive line, and I think we can all agree that the standout player from the first day of practice was CJ West, 4th round pick, defensive tackle out of Indiana, and he's one of those guys where he's a little bit shorter in stature, but it really helps him with his leverage. Really quick, really aggressive. You love to see that. Now, maybe he wasn't as dominant on the second day of padded practice, but overall, he's having a really good camp. And when you think about the defensive line, and we're going to talk about other guys here, that has been basically when you kind of going in and coming into the 2025 season, that I believe is probably our biggest weakness. We are relying on some of these younger guys to step up, and they're going to be playing a lot of snaps. So CJ West having a really good day. Love to hear that. Other guys, Alfred Collins, Evan Anderson. So Alfred Collins, a 2nd round pick out of Texas. Evan Anderson, last year, undrafted free agent. Both guys really trying to make a name for themselves. Collins is just a massive human being, so I think having him out there, he's going to be able to chew up, space when it comes to defending against the run, trying to maybe develop some pass rushing moves. Overall, it's going to be really interesting to see the rotation at the defensive tackle position as during preseason, and of course into the regular season. How much will these rookies play? Can they continue to stack good days in training camp? Can they have some good moments in preseason? That is going to be something to watch. And keeping on the defensive line, Mykel Williams, 1st round pick out of Georgia. He has been really, really good. Looked great on Monday. Coming off the edge, they had him moving inside. They had him in, a 4-point stance on the ground, 2-point stance standing up, and he's just been everywhere. Think of him as that, if you remember, like Charles Omenihu or Arden Key, but I think he can take that role and just just go crazy with it. Someone who can just line up all over the defensive line. They're going to get creative. They're going to try and mix up offensive lines. Just have that. If you can get an offensive line to kind of question what they're doing for a split second, that could be just enough to get a guy in the backfield, sack the quarterback, and who knows what else could happen. Very quickly, too, on the edge, you're looking at Bryce Huff and you're looking at Sam Okuwanu, and both those guys looking like those speed edge rushers that this kind of defense always needs. Don't be surprised if you start seeing, on 3rd and 10, if you see Bosa out there, if you see Michael Williams, if you see, Bryce Huff, and maybe Sam Oak as well. Like, who knows? There's going to be a lot of different variations, and that's what's really exciting for this defense. Now, if we move on to the linebackers, D. Winters seems like he is solidifying himself to start off beside Fred Warner heading into this season. So typically, although base downs, you'd probably have 3 linebackers out there. What teams play a lot more? We're going to be playing in nickel a lot more. So that combo of Fred Warner, D. Winters is going to be out there a lot. You do have other guys in the mix. So you have Nick Martin, the 3rd round pick out of Oklahoma State. You have Luke Gifford, one of the veteran guys who's also a special teams ace. They're kind of like competing for that 3rd linebacker spot. If we think back to when we had Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, Azeez Al-Shaair, they're kind of looking to fill that Azeez Al-Shaair type role. But overall, I think, this is a really, really healthy competition. You do also have to factor in guys like Jalen Graham is going to be in there, Tatum Bethune's going to be in there, Curtis Robinson is working his way back from injury. So there is some stiff competition at this position, and that will hopefully bring out the best in everyone. But overall, D. Winters is looking like the guy who should start opposite of Fred Warner, and that's not a bad thing at all. Looks like he's really elevated his game this offseason. Let's now move to the secondary, and the one guy that we have to talk about here is Upton Stout, 3rd round pick out of Western Kentucky, and he is someone who has just made his presence felt, and that's something that we're going to need moving forward. Upton Stout looking to compete for the starter at the nickelback position, which is a position that just has so much importance in today's NFL. We remember how good we had it when we had a guy like K'Wan Williams there at that position. Upton Stout is a lot more athletic, probably not as technically refined as a K'Wan Williams, which to be expected because K'Wan was a veteran when we brought him to San Francisco, but overall, gotta love the aggressiveness that Upton Stout plays with. Maybe it could potentially lead to some penalties, but maybe, we want to rein that in just a tiny bit. But you never want to take away a guy's aggressiveness in this defense. So he's going to be all over his receivers, breaking passes up. And the other thing too is he is not afraid to get in there and make a play in the run game, which again, that's what we ask from cornerbacks in this defense. Upton Stout not afraid to lay a hit on a running back. You love to see it. So with Renardo Green out with injury for the next few weeks, who's going to step up in his place on the outside? Well, you have a number of guys competing there. The newly signed Eli Apple, former 1st round pick. You have Trey Brown out there. You have Dallas Flowers out there, and Darrell Luter Jr. So a number of guys there that are names that are probably not going to stick out as, Pro Bowl caliber guys. There are still some free agents on the market that the Niners could potentially look at. But overall, it's a pretty healthy competition, made the best man win, and maybe most importantly is we're just hoping that Renardo Green will be back soon, and as long as he's ready for the regular season, then I'll be a happy man. Let's move on to the safety position. Seems like Jair Brown and Jason Pinnock have locked down the starting positions so far. That's not set in stone by any means. You still have guys like rookie Marquise Siegel. You also have veteran Richie Grant who are going to be trying to take one of those starting spots. However, I think when you factor in, I think it is going to be Pinnock and Jair Brown starting at safety come week 1 of the NFL season. I'll be very curious to see how these guys play as training camp progresses during the preseason games. What can they show? Can they solidify themselves those starting positions? Then you have Malik Mustafa. When is he going to be back? My guess is probably somewhere in the mid-season, and it's probably going to take him a little bit of time to get acclimated into the defense. So, I think it's going to be Pinnock and Jair that we roll with for the time being, but hopefully Mustafa comes back, and you'd love to see a rookie like Marquise Siegel really elevate his game. Finally, we're going to move on to special teams, and we'll just cover this super quick. So we have our kicking competition, and Greg Joseph, Jake Moody, the reporters are keeping an eye on, made kicks and missed kicks. And while that does mean something, I think the bigger things are going to happen when it comes to the preseason games. When there is some pressure, that you need to make that kick. How are you going to kick when there's an opposing team trying to come and block you? And remember, a lot of those guys who are going to be in those special teams formations, those are guys fighting for a roster spot. So they're going to be going all out to try and make blocks, to put off the kicker, to do all of that good stuff. So it's one of those things where I think the preseason, while normally there's really little to no pressure for a lot of guys, I think especially Jake Moody, there is going to be pressure for him to deliver, or else the Niners won't be afraid to cut ties with him and move to the veteran Greg Joseph. That's something to watch more for the preseason. But there you have it, guys. I've covered the first couple of days of padded practice, and I do want to give a huge shout out to a couple of 49er content creators out there. So you have the SF Niners, Brad Graham. Then you look at Nick Wagner, I believe, who is just doing some great job covering the 49ers and just getting so much good information from them, but not being able to be there in person, but some really good, thorough reports. And I would highly recommend you check out both of those guys for continued coverage of training camp. If any major news hits the 49ers, of course, I'll be here to cover it as well. Just want to say thank you guys for watching. Do the good stuff like, subscribe, and comment. And just before I head out, I'm going to say two things. The butt counts, and I'll catch you guys on the flip side.